This entire artwork was made only using one color. And then I did it again. But I didn't get to choose either of these colors. I used this random color generator to pick a color for me so that I don't have control over what I pick. And somehow I got my favorite color. And then I tried it again. And got my least favorite color. And that's when I realized this challenge might teach me something about colors. Challenge is pretty simple. Use a random color generator and whatever color I get becomes the only hue that I'm allowed to use for my entire artwork. I can make it lighter, I can make it darker, but I can't just introduce another color because something isn't working. Basically, I have to make the color work. And I decided to do it twice because if I get one color that I already like, I don't know if I'm actually learning something. The first drawing is going to be an experiment and the second one is going to be a test. So my first random color was blue, which is honestly perfect because blue is my favorite color. So I started thinking what I could actually make with it. So instead of picking a character first and forcing blue onto them, I decided to let the color influence the idea. First things I associated with blue were water, fish, ocean, swimming, and that gave me the direction for the whole drawing. I wanted the character to feel like they belonged to this underwater world. Here I'm looking for some interesting shapes, a clear pose, and some details which associate the character with the underwater environment. Because if silhouette doesn't work out, adding tiny details won't even matter. Then I started adding color, and almost immediately I saw the problem. Everything was blue. The character was blue, the fishes were blue, and the background was blue. And apparently being my favorite color doesn't mean that blue will do all the work for me. The problem was that everything was sitting around the same value. So even though all these elements were technically different, visually they would start to blend together. So I stopped thinking about hue for a second and started thinking about value. Value is basically how light or dark something is. And this is where challenge started getting interesting because I realized I didn't need another color to separate these things. Pay close attention to her clothes. They feel like a very light color. And now compare it to her hair. Look at this, so much dark. And this is, my friends, the magic of values. You can draw with one color only. How cool is it? You could actually keep the same blue hue and just make it lighter or darker. And suddenly this image started making sense. Same hues, different value. You have to do it. Gets you a completely different visual result. So I started applying this idea everywhere in this image. I put darker values where I wanted depth, just like under the hair, in the clothing, and in overlapping shapes. And then I started saving my brightest values for the area of interest, the areas that I basically wanted to stand out, especially around the face. Meanwhile, I kept the background in just one darkest value so it wouldn't compete with the character. And slowly the whole thing started coming together, and this is where I ended up. Honestly, I really liked it, but blue is my favorite color. So maybe I just got lucky. Maybe I didn't learn how to use the color. Maybe I just only know how to make my favorite color look good. So I tried it again. Green. Yeah, green is probably my least favorite color. So if blue was the easier version, this is where I actually have to prove that I learned something. And now I had the problem. I had the color, but I had no idea what to draw. And honestly, this happens to me a lot. Like I open a canvas and there is nothing in my brain. Literally nothing. So instead of sitting there and waiting for an idea to come naturally to me, I decided to start with the only thing I had. And I had one color. That's it. So I started writing everything I associated with green color. The plants, the grass, the sea, and I finally landed on the idea. What if I made a character surrounded by green candy? And instead of making the candy a background element, I thought it would be cool if I make it a part of the character. And just like that, I went from having absolutely no idea what to draw to having an entire character concept. Can you imagine how cool it is? Now I had the idea, but I still had the same limitation that everything has to be green: the character, the candy, the environment. But this time, I knew what the problem was, and I already had a solution. The blue drawing taught me I could create separations without changing the hue. Hue is just a fancy name for color. I just needed to control my values. This time, I was thinking about values from the beginning. Where should be my darkest areas? And where should be my brightest areas? I could make the character stand out without using any color. I could separate the candy from the background without changing the hue. And on top of that, I can create depth just by controlling the relationship between lights and darks. And then I realized values were doing something else. They weren't just creating depth, they're also controlling where you look. In this case, I wanted the focal point to be the face of the character. So I increase the contrast around the face of the character. Then I keep some of the surrounding areas quieter. And now finally, as the basic value structure was working, so I could finally focus on details. The face, the hair, the candy, the little highlights, all those small things that make the character feel finished. And I actually don't hate it, which is honestly impressive because green is my least favorite color to work with. So now I had two completely different characters. One made with my favorite color and one with my least favorite. Blue was easy for me to like. Green wasn't. But the interesting part is, the same principle worked on both of them. Dark against light, light against dark, a strong contrast around focal point, and quieter values where I don't want attention. And if I take the color away, you will still be able to see the structure. And that's when it clicked me. I started this challenge thinking I need to get better at using colors. More color palette, more color combination, and more ways to make each individual color look good. But this challenge forced me to almost remove all of that. And I realized if the values aren't working, adding more colors isn't going to necessarily fix the drawing. So I don't think mastering color means knowing exactly what color to choose every time. I think it's knowing what you can do with whatever color you get. So apparently I didn't need more colors. I just needed to take them away, and I definitely didn't expect my least favorite color to teach me more than my favorite.